The police station was eerily quiet, as it often was on midnight shifts in the small town of Fairview, Illinois. The hum of fluorescent lights and the rustle of paper were the only sounds as Officer Emily Parker worked through the last of her reports. Outside, the streets were dark and empty, illuminated only by the occasional flicker of an aging street lamp. Fairview wasn't the kind of place where much happened, especially after dark, and Emily usually welcomed the calm. But that night was different. The sound was faint at first, scratching, like claws against metal. Emily paused, her pen hovering above the page. Maybe it was the wind or one of the raccoons that often scavenged near the dumpsters out back. She tried to ignore it. But the sound came again, persistent and deliberate. With a sigh, she stood and walked to the station's front door, her boots echoing against the tiled floor. When she opened the door, Emily found herself staring into the piercing green eyes of a grey tabby cat. Its fur shimmered faintly under the streetlights, groomed to a shine that seemed unusual for a stray. For a moment, Emily hesitated, unsure what to make of the creature. It didn't look frightened or lost. Instead, its gaze was intense, almost pleading. The cat meowed urgently, its voice cutting through the stillness of the night. "Hey there, little one," Emily said softly, crouching down to its level. But before she could reach out, the cat turned and darted a few feet away, only to stop and look back. Meowing again, it paced anxiously, as if trying to say, "Follow me." Emily blinked in surprise. She had seen enough movies to recognize the classic come-with-me behavior. But this wasn't the kind of thing that happened in real life. Or so she thought. She straightened and called over her shoulder to her partner, Jack Carter, who was leaning back in his chair with a steaming cup of coffee. "Jack, you're going to think I've lost it," she said, her voice tinged with incredulity. "But I think this cat wants us to follow it." Jack raised an eyebrow, setting his mug down. "You've been watching too many animal rescue videos, Parker," he quipped. Before Emily could respond, the cat took matters into its own paws, or teeth. Rather, it darted back to her, grabbed the hem of her uniform sleeve in its mouth, and tugged gently but insistently. Even Jack, ever the skeptic, stood up at that. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered, grabbing his jacket. "If this ends up in the weird calls log, I'm blaming you." Emily stepped outside, radioing the situation to dispatch as the cat took the lead. It trotted ahead with purpose, stopping every few yards to glance back and ensure the officers were following. Despite her initial doubts, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the cat knew exactly what it was doing. The journey led them through Fairview's quiet streets, past darkened storefronts and sleeping homes. The town felt like a ghost of itself at this hour, and the rhythmic sound of their boots on the pavement was the only thing grounding Emily in the surreal moment. When they reached the old Fairview textile mill, Emily's unease deepened. The building had been abandoned for years, its windows shattered and its walls weathered by time. A rusty chain-link fence surrounded the property, with a crooked sign warning trespassers of the dangerous structure. Yet something about the place felt wrong in a way Emily couldn't quite articulate. The cat led them to a gap in the fence, where the metal had been freshly cut. Emily knelt to examine it, her fingers brushing against the clean, sharp edges. "Someone's been here recently," she murmured. Jack nodded, his flashlight beam sweeping over the yard. The cat slipped through the gap and paused on the other side. Waiting patiently, Emily's stomach tightened as they stepped through the fence and approached the mill. The building loomed above them, its broken windows dark and hollow like empty eyes. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back. But the cat had already bounded ahead, its tail held high like a banner. At the side of the building, they found a door ajar. Fresh scratches marred the metal near the handle, at just the right height for a cat. "This just keeps getting weirder," Jack muttered, drawing his weapon. Emily followed suit, and together they stepped inside. The air was thick with the musty scent of decay, but there was something else. 2. Something sharp and chemical that made Emily wrinkle her nose. Dust hung in the air, swirling in the beams of their flashlights as they moved cautiously through the space. The cat guided them past rusted machinery and empty storage rooms, its movements silent and deliberate. Emily couldn't help but marvel at its composure. Most animals would have fled at the slightest sound, but this cat seemed entirely unbothered by the oppressive atmosphere of the mill. As they reached a long corridor, the cat stopped abruptly, its ears pricking forward. It let out a low growl, the sound rumbling deep in its throat. "What is it, Buddy?" Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. That's when they heard it, a faint, muffled whimper. The sound sent a shiver down Emily's spine. It was coming from behind a heavy metal door at the end of the corridor. The cat bolted to the door, scratching at it frantically. Emily and Jack exchanged a glance before moving closer, their flashlights illuminating the fresh marks the cat was leaving among dozens of older scratches. Jack tried the handle. "Locked," he said grimly, shining his light on a sturdy padlock. Emily's heart raced as she reached for her radio. "Dispatch. This is Officer Parker. We've got a locked door and possible activity at the old Fairview Mill. Requesting immediate backup." "Copy that." Parker, came the dispatcher's bemused reply. "Did you say a cat led you there?" Emily didn't have time to explain. The whimpering was louder now, words barely audible through the thick metal. "Please, help." Jack raised his boot and kicked the lock. On the third attempt, it gave way with a metallic clang, the sound echoing through the building. When the door swung open, Emily's flashlight revealed the scene inside, and it was worse than anything she had imagined. The beam of Emily's flashlight cut through the dark room, revealing a figure huddled in the corner. It was a young girl, no older than 10, her knees pulled tightly to her chest. Her face was streaked with tears, and her thin arms were wrapped around a grey woolen blanket. Emily's heart clenched as she stepped closer. The girl's wide eyes flicked up to meet hers, filled with a mix of terror and relief. Beside her, the grey tabby purred softly, nuzzling her leg as though to comfort her. "It's okay," Emily said gently, lowering herself to the girl's eye level and holstering her weapon. "You're safe now. My name's Emily. We're here to help." Jack scanned the room with his flashlight, keeping an eye on the shadows that seemed to crawl along the walls. It was a small, windowless space, cluttered with boxes and rusting tools. The air was heavy with the acrid scent of chemicals, and an old, rattling ventilation fan in the corner did little to move the stale air. The girl didn't speak, but her eyes stayed locked on Emily's. The fear in them was almost palpable, and Emily could see how hard she was trying to hold herself together. "Are you hurt?" Emily asked softly, trying to keep her voice steady despite the tightness in her chest. The girl shook her head but didn't release her grip on her knees. Jack knelt beside Emily, speaking in a low voice. "She's been here a while," he said, nodding toward a half-eaten packet of crackers and an empty water bottle in the corner. "Someone left her supplies, but not enough to last long." Emily's stomach twisted. Someone had left this child here deliberately. But why? The cat meowed, pacing back and forth in front of the door, its tail flicking anxiously. Emily reached out to the girl again, her fingers brushing lightly against her arm. The child flinched but didn't pull away entirely. "It's okay," Emily repeated. "We'll get you out of here. I promise." "Do you have a name?" The girl hesitated, her lips trembling as she whispered, "Maya." Emily felt a surge of relief. It wasn't much, but it was a start. "That's a beautiful name. Maya. Can you stand? We need to leave this place." Maya nodded slowly, unfolding herself from her tight position. She moved gingerly, her legs unsteady as though she hadn't used them in days. Emily slipped an arm around her to help her up, her mind racing with questions she couldn't yet ask. Jack's voice broke the moment. "We're not alone," he said, his flashlight landing on a shadow that shifted just beyond the door. Emily's pulse quickened. The cat hissed. its fur bristling as it darted to Emily's side. Its sharp eyes fixed on the corridor. Jack moved quickly, positioning himself between the door and Emily and Maya. His gun was drawn, the barrel steady despite the tension in his jaw. "Who's there?" Jack called out, his voice firm. For a moment, there was only silence. Then came the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, and far too calm for Emily's liking. A man stepped into the doorway, his face partially obscured by the dim light. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a cold, calculating air. His expression was unreadable, but the slight curl of his lip spoke volumes. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice low and menacing. Emily's grip on Maya tightened instinctively. She could feel the girl trembling against her side. "Step back," Jack ordered, his gun trained on the intruder. "This doesn't have to get messy." The man didn't move, his eyes flicking between Jack and Emily before landing on Maya. His gaze lingered there, and Emily felt an icy chill run down her spine. "You have no idea what you're interfering with," the man said, his tone laced with disdain. "Try me," Jack shot back. Emily's mind raced as she calculated their options. They were cornered, with no backup yet and a child to protect. The man didn't seem armed, but the confidence in his stance told her he wasn't afraid of a confrontation. Suddenly, the cat sprang forward, hissing and clawing at the man's leg. He stumbled back, caught off guard, and Jack seized the moment to lunge, disarming him with practiced precision. Emily quickly ushered Maya toward the door. "Let's go," she urged, her voice firm but calm. Maya hesitated, looking back at the man. "He said he'd come back for me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Emily knelt down, looking her in the eyes. "He won't hurt you anymore. You're safe with us now." Maya's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Together, they stepped out into the corridor, the cat trotting at their heels. Behind them, Jack had the man pinned against the wall, his radio crackling as he called for immediate backup. The night outside felt colder, sharper. As they emerged from the mill, Emily clutched Maya close, her thoughts racing as the weight of the situation began to settle over her. Whatever was happening, it wasn't over, not yet. The air outside the mill was crisp and biting, carrying the sharp scent of damp earth and rusted metal. Emily led Maya through the overgrown lot, her arm protectively wrapped around the trembling child. The grey tabby weaved between their legs, a silent sentinel, as though it understood the gravity of the moment. Behind them, the mill loomed like a sleeping giant, its broken windows glinting faintly in the moonlight. Jack emerged moments later, dragging the man in tow. His hands were zip-tied behind his back, and his face bore a cold fury. "Backup's on the way," Jack said, his voice steady but strained. His eyes flicked to Maya, then to Emily. "We need to talk." "But not here." Emily nodded, ushering Maya toward the car parked at the edge of the property. The girl didn't protest, but her small hand clung tightly to Emily's jacket, her grip a silent plea not to be left alone. As they drove back to the precinct, the car was steeped in an uneasy silence. Maya sat huddled in the back seat, her eyes fixed on the streaked window. The cat had jumped in with them and curled itself in her lap, its steady purring the only sound. Emily glanced at her in the rearview mirror, her mind swirling with questions. Who was this man? Why had he left Maya in that place? And what could have possibly driven someone to trap a child in such darkness? Jack broke the silence, his voice low. "Did you see the look in his eyes? He wasn't afraid of getting caught." Emily nodded, her knuckles tightening on the wheel. "He knows something." But Maya, her voice trailed off as she glanced back at the girl again. Maya's face was a mask of exhaustion and fear, her small frame dwarfed by the oversized coat Emily had wrapped around her. They arrived at the station, where Emily carried Maya inside, the cat still faithfully following. An officer guided them to a small, Quiet room with a worn sofa and a table piled with coloring books and crayons. Emily knelt in front of Maya. "This is a safe place," she said softly. "We're going to figure everything out. But for now, would you like something to eat? Maybe some juice?" Maya nodded hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Apple juice." Emily smiled gently. "Apple juice it is." Jack joined her outside the room, his expression unreadable. "He hasn't said much," he began, referring to the man they'd arrested. "But what little he's said doesn't sit right. He called her the key." Emily's brow furrowed. "The key to what?" Jack shrugged, frustration evident in his tone. "He wouldn't say. But there's more to this than we thought. He's not just some unhinged kidnapper." As Emily turned to look back at Maya through the small window in the door, a memory stirred in her mind. A fragment of something she had seen earlier in the mill, a symbol carved into the wall above Maya's corner. It was faint, almost hidden beneath layers of grime, but it had caught her attention, an intricate, swirling pattern, like an Ouroboros. She hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now it lingered in her mind like a puzzle waiting to be solved. The sound of footsteps interrupted her thoughts as a social worker arrived. A kind-faced woman with soft eyes. "This must be Maya," the woman said gently, glancing into the room. "She's been through a lot," Emily said. "Take it slow." The woman nodded and stepped inside, sitting beside Maya and speaking to her in a soft, reassuring tone. Emily leaned against the wall, exhaustion seeping into her bones. Jack stood beside her, his voice low. "You've seen that look before," he said. "The one she's wearing." Emily didn't respond right away. She didn't have to. He was right. That haunted look. The silent resilience, it was too familiar. As the night deepened, the pieces of the puzzle began to connect in Emily's mind. But the picture they were forming wasn't clear yet. And she couldn't shake the feeling that Maya's story was just the beginning. The hours crept into the early morning. The station bathed in a muted stillness punctuated by the hum of overhead lights. Emily sat at her desk, her fingers absently tracing the rim of a cold cup of coffee. Jack was across from her, hunched over a stack of papers, his brow furrowed in deep concentration. "I keep running it through," Jack said, breaking the silence. "This guy, he's no amateur. No priors. No clear motive. And nothing to tie him to Maya. It's like he appeared out of thin air." Emily looked up from the notes she was compiling. "Except he didn't. He was there for a reason. And he said she was the key. Whatever that means. He thinks Maya is important to something or someone." Jack exhaled heavily, leaning back in his chair. "And that symbol you mentioned? You're sure it was deliberate?" Emily nodded. "It wasn't random graffiti. Someone carved it into the wall above where she was kept. We need to figure out what it means. Maybe it's connected to why she was taken." Before Jack could respond, a commotion echoed from down the hall. Emily and Jack exchanged a glance, both instantly alert, and hurried toward the sound. They found the man they had arrested, now in the interrogation room, laughing. The hollow, eerie sound sent a chill through Emily. "Care to share the joke?" Jack asked as he stepped into the room, his tone edged with irritation. The man looked up, his grin unnerving in its calmness. "You think this ends with me," he said, his voice smooth, almost amused. "It's so much bigger than you can imagine. Bigger than her." Emily stepped forward, her jaw tightening. "What's bigger? Tell us why you took her. Why Maya?" The man leaned back, the grin never leaving his face. "You're looking for answers in the wrong places. She's not the key because of what she's done. It's because of what she will do." "What does that even mean?" Emily demanded, her voice rising. The man tilted his head, as if amused by her frustration. "You think you're protecting her, but you're just delaying the inevitable." His gaze sharpened. "You can't stop what's coming." Emily's fists clenched, but Jack placed a calming hand on her arm, silently urging her to step back. Outside the room, Emily paced the corridor, anger simmering beneath her skin. Jack joined her moments later, his expression grim. We're not getting more out of him tonight. Whatever he knows, he's holding on to it. Emily glanced back toward the room where Maya was resting. The social worker had convinced her to sleep on the sofa. The cat curled protectively beside her. The sight tugged at Emily's heart, a child so young, carrying the weight of secrets she likely didn't understand. We need to dig deeper, Emily said, her voice firm. This isn't just a kidnapping. There's something bigger here. And Maya's at the center of it. We owe it to her to figure it out. Jack nodded, his face set with resolve. Let's start with that symbol. Maybe it's a lead. And as the first rays of dawn broke over the station, Emily felt the weight of a truth she wasn't yet ready to face. Something was coming, and Maya's role in it was far from over. The morning air carried the faint chill of approaching winter as Emily sat at her desk, scanning through reports. A faint light filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room. Jack entered, holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee. He set one down in front of her without a word, his eyes betraying his own fatigue. I found something, Jack said, pulling a chair closer. That symbol you saw, it's not just a random marking. It's tied to an old myth, something called the Sentinel's Mark. It's been linked to obscure cult movements over the years. Emily raised an eyebrow, intrigued but wary. Cults? Are we seriously going there? Jack handed her a printed image of a symbol identical to the one carved into the wall above where Maya had been held. It's been reported across several countries, usually cropping up in connection with disappearances, though never anything this high profile. It represents protection or, in some cases, sacrifice. The word hung in the air like an unspoken threat. Emily's gaze darted toward the room where Maya was resting. She could feel a deep unease settling in the pit of her stomach. Jack leaned forward, lowering his voice. There's more. Some of these cults believed that certain individuals, children, mostly, had a special connection to, I don't know, some greater purpose. It's all cryptic. But the gist is that these kids were seen as either saviors or threats, depending on the perspective. Emily frowned, the pieces beginning to form a troubling picture. And they think Maya is one of these kids. Jack nodded. It's starting to look that way. But here's the thing, there's no indication these groups are still active. The most recent sighting of this symbol was over a decade ago. Whoever this guy is, he's either part of something new or carrying on an old belief. Before Emily could respond, Maya appeared in the doorway, clutching the cat. Her eyes were puffy from sleep, but there was a clarity in them that caught Emily off guard. Am I in trouble? Maya asked softly. Emily stood, her heart aching at the question. She crouched to meet Maya's gaze, her voice gentle. No, sweetheart. You're safe here. And we're going to make sure you stay that way. Okay. Maya nodded but didn't look convinced. She hugged the cat tighter. The man who took me, he said I was special, that I had to help. But I don't know how. Emily exchanged a glance with Jack, who seemed as shaken as she felt. Did he say anything else? Maya? Anything about why he thought that? Maya hesitated, then shook her head. No. He just kept saying I'd understand someday. But I don't want to understand. I just want to go home. Emily's throat tightened. She reached out and brushed a strand of hair from Maya's face. We'll figure this out. Maya. I promise. As Maya returned to the sofa, Emily turned to Jack, her expression steely. Whatever this is, it stops here. We're not letting anyone else hurt her. Jack nodded, his jaw set. Then let's find out who these people are and how to end this. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of investigation and reflection. Maya was finally reunited with her family, a tearful embrace marking the end of a harrowing ordeal. Yet, for Emily and Jack, the story lingered, its threads woven deeply into their lives. As they sat together on the porch of Emily's small home, Each of them grappled with the truths they had uncovered, not only about the case but about themselves. Emily sipped her tea, staring out at the fading sunlight. Her voice was quiet, almost reflective. I used to think the world was black and white. You know? Good and evil. Right and wrong. But Maya, she reminded me that even in the darkest moments, there's light. She showed me that sometimes, it's not about winning or losing. It's about protecting what matters. About making sure that light doesn't go out. She glanced at Jack, her lips curving into a faint smile. She made me realize that being strong doesn't mean being invulnerable. It means being willing to care, even when it hurts. Jack nodded, turning the mug of coffee in his hands as though searching for the right words. For me, he said after a moment, it was about trust. I've spent my life building walls, keeping people at arm's length. But this case, it forced me to see that you can't do it all alone. You have to let people in. Even when it feels risky, you have to believe that some bonds, like the one Maya had with her family, or even this, he gestured between them, are worth fighting for. He looked down, his voice thick with emotion. And Maya, she taught me that strength comes in all forms. She faced things no child should ever have to. But she didn't let it break her. If she can find a way forward, then so can I. Inside the house, Maya sat at the kitchen table, drawing with colored pencils Emily had bought for her. The cat, now affectionately named Shadow, purred contentedly in her lap. When Emily and Jack stepped inside, Maya looked up, her face calm but her eyes wiser than her years. I've been thinking, she said softly, about what he told me, about being special. I don't think he meant it in the right way. But I want to be special in a good way. I want to help people. Like you helped me. Emily knelt beside her, her heart swelling with pride and sorrow. You already are, Maya. You're brave. And kind. And that's more special than anything someone like him could ever understand. Maya smiled faintly, looking down at her drawing. It was of a sunny field. A family holding hands beneath a wide blue sky. I think I'll be okay, she whispered. And she would be. The lessons they each carried were stitched into the fabric of their lives, shaping how they would move forward. Emily, with renewed faith in the power of connection. Jack, with a resolve to let down his walls and trust in others. And Maya, with a quiet determination to use her experience to spread kindness and hope. The story wasn't just about what they had endured, it was about what they had gained, a deeper understanding of love, resilience, and the unyielding strength found in even the smallest acts of compassion. For in the end, it wasn't the darkness that defined them, it was their choice to hold on to the light.